This episode is presented to you in the style of an audiobook. Every challenge you encounter in life often stems from a single source: caring too much about what others think of you. This constant concern over others' opinions is the foundation of much of our unhappiness. Today we'll explore The Courage to be Disliked, a thought-provoking book co-written by Japanese philosopher and psychologist Ichiro Kishimi and author Fumitake Koga. Both writers emphasize that our inner struggles are always connected to the external world. They argue that there is no such thing as a worry that exists entirely within oneself. In every personal concern, the influence of others can always be found. Kishimi and Koga suggest that life's problems are not as complicated as they appear. They become difficult only because we make them so. According to them, the key to happiness lies in one essential quality: the courage to be disliked. They explain that to live freely, one must accept the possibility of being disliked. True freedom means not being controlled by the desire to be liked by others. It's not that you lack confidence, you simply lack courage. And the courage to be happy naturally includes the courage to be disliked. Once you develop this courage, your relationships with others will transform, becoming lighter and freer. In this episode, we'll unpack the central lessons from the book, exploring the psychology behind unhappiness, why chasing external approval leads nowhere, and how you can begin to live a genuinely fulfilling life. Kishimi and Koga's perspective rests on a simple but powerful belief. Every person, regardless of their past or circumstances, has the power to choose happiness. The past holds the possibility of happiness. The key distinction between happy and unhappy people lies in their openness to change. This idea is rooted in the theories of psychologist Alfred Adler, who believed that the self functions as a unified whole. Our body, mind, emotions, and both conscious and unconscious thoughts all cooperate toward a shared objective. According to Adler, every action, thought, or feeling we experience is directed toward achieving a particular goal, even when we're not fully aware of it. In his view, goals don't merely influence our happiness, they define who we are. This means that the aims we set for ourselves actively shape our sense of identity. Authors Kishimi and Koga expand on this interpretation. They explain that Adler's psychology doesn't focus on rigid personality traits, but rather views individuals through the concept of lifestyle. To Adler, a person's habits, emotions, and thoughts make up a lifestyle, one that they have consciously or unconsciously chosen because they believe it's the best way to reach their goals. For instance, Kishimi and Koga argue that there's no such thing as an inherently antisocial person. What we call antisocial behavior is, in fact, a choice, a method of pursuing specific objectives. They also suggest that our goals don't just guide our actions, but also shape our emotions. In other words, we first decide what we want, and then our mind creates the emotions that help us move toward that desire. Consider someone who wants a job but becomes so anxious about the interview that they fail to prepare or even attend. They may believe that if the anxiety disappeared, they could perform better. However, Kishimi and Koga would interpret this differently. They would say the person's real goal is not to get the job, but to avoid the possibility of failure. Fear becomes a tool that supports this hidden goal, helping them stay away from a situation where they might fail. Kishimi and Koga also respond to the idea that past trauma prevents people from achieving happiness. They acknowledge that negative experiences, especially in childhood, can influence our goals, but they emphasize that not everyone who faces trauma remains trapped by it. It's entirely up to you to decide which goals to pursue and how to live in order to reach them. In their book, the authors explain that no experience alone causes success or failure. We don't truly suffer because of what happens to us in the so-called trauma, but rather from the meaning we attach to those experiences. What matters is not the event itself, but how we interpret it. We are not shaped by our experiences. Instead, the meaning we assign to them determines who we become. The authors also emphasize that whatever has happened in your life so far should have no control over how you live from this moment onward. You living in the present have full authority over the direction of your own life. If happiness is within our control, then why would anyone choose to remain unhappy? Kishimi and Koga suggest that unhappiness can sometimes be a deliberate strategy people use to achieve certain aims. They argue that the goals we set influence our emotions. Feeling unhappy now and then is normal. Everyone faces moments of disappointment or frustration. However, those who are consistently unhappy are usually guided by one recurring and frustrating goal, which often stems from their relationships with others. This point is crucial. According to Kishimi and Koga, your level of happiness depends greatly on the goals you set within your relationships. In other words, what is it that you seek to accomplish in your interactions with others? The answer to that question largely defines your emotional well-being. Your emotions and your self-perception are both shaped by the objectives you pursue, and the goal that most influences your overall happiness is the one related to your relationships. Kishimi and Koga identify two main aims people tend to have when dealing with others: seeking approval or striving to make a positive contribution to their lives. Unhappy people, the authors explain, often center their lives around gaining others' approval. They believe that true happiness comes from being perceived as good or worthy by those around them, whether that validation comes from a parent, teacher, or society at large. But this constant need for approval almost always leads to unhappiness. Essentially, those who depend on being liked by others equate acceptance with personal worth. Some may argue that wanting approval and validation is simply human nature. But Kishimi and Koga clarify that this belief is misplaced. They point out that we don't seek approval to find happiness. Rather, we feel happy when approval fulfills a deeper emotional need within us. So, why do people chase recognition? According to the authors, it often begins with the way we're raised, through systems of reward and punishment. Kishimi and Koga note that even when unhappy people succeed in earning approval, it usually comes at a significant cost. In trying to meet others' expectations, they end up living by someone else's standards. The result is the loss of personal freedom, and ultimately, of happiness. Living in constant concern about how others perceive you, or tailoring your behavior to please them, might offer direction, but it's an unfree way to live. So why choose such a limited path? When you talk about a desire for recognition, what you often mean is a fear of being disliked. Unless you can accept the possibility of being judged, ignored, or even disliked, and be willing to pay that price, you'll never be able to live according to your own principles. True freedom requires independence from others' opinions. Being praised at its core simply means you're being judged by someone else's standards. Their idea of what's good or bad becomes the measure you live by, and if praise is what you constantly seek, you'll always be defined by someone else's approval, not by your own sense of self. One inevitably ends up adjusting to another person's standards and restricting their own sense of freedom. We've already seen how seeking others' approval can feel momentarily rewarding, but this isn't the most damaging part of making it your main goal. Kishimi and Koga argue that the deeper issue lies in how impossible this goal often is. Approval is usually based on meeting other people's expectations, meaning it's largely outside your control. No matter how hard you try, there will always be situations where you simply cannot make someone like you. According to Kishimi and Koga, when people realize that earning approval is unattainable, they often respond by setting a new self-defeating goal. Instead of continuing to pursue something they can't achieve, they give up entirely. To justify this decision, they create emotions like fear, resentment, or self-blame, convincing themselves that trying isn't worth it. However, as the authors point out, this reaction doesn't free them from the desire for approval. By giving up, they don't release the goal. They only strengthen their emotional attachment to it. This makes them even more unhappy, as they continue to feel the frustration of chasing something they've already abandoned. Their next step is often to form a belief that something about them is fundamentally wrong or broken, which makes them unworthy of others' approval. This belief serves as a shield. It protects them from future disappointment because they can claim that rejection is inevitable. But it also traps them in a life of helplessness and despair, as they now believe they have no power to change what they see as their flaws. Kishimi and Koga also emphasize that the constant need for external approval doesn't just lower self-esteem. It damages relationships as well. Unhappy individuals begin to view life as a competition, seeing others as rivals rather than equals. In this mindset, another person's success feels like a personal loss. Approval is conditional. It depends on performance or qualities like humor, kindness, or professional success. These expectations are difficult to meet, and no one can excel in every area. Naturally, when someone else gains more recognition, it raises the bar and makes your own efforts seem smaller. Kashimi and Koga describe this pursuit of approval as a zero-sum game. The more someone else is praised, the worse you appear by comparison. In this way, the desire for approval turns life itself into a constant contest, one where genuine happiness and connection are nearly impossible to achieve. Competition that creates winners and losers often leads unhappy individuals to fear the achievements of others. At times, they may even find satisfaction in another person's failure, instead of offering genuine support. Such attitudes prevent them from developing healthy and meaningful relationships. Kashimi and Koga explain that when a person frees themselves from the mindset of constant competition, the urge to surpass or outdo others fades away. The second reason seeking approval damages relationships is that unhappy people often believe these connections must be built on sacrifice. Their desire for validation can also create a sense of entitlement. According to Kashimi and Koga, those who spend their lives trying to satisfy others' expectations eventually grow resentful when people, especially loved ones, fail to meet theirs in return. They further explain that unhappy people often feel mistreated when their efforts go unacknowledged. For instance, imagine someone throws a surprise birthday party for a friend and later feels hurt when the gesture isn't reciprocated. In this case, the act of kindness was never truly selfless. It was driven by an expectation of return. If the friend feels obligated but unwilling to do the same, resentment begins to form. Now that we've discussed how the constant need for external approval can harm one's life and relationships, let's look at the alternative. Kashimi and Koga's advice for achieving genuine happiness. They suggest that instead of chasing approval, happy people concentrate on helping others. They find real fulfillment in contributing to the well-being of those around them. For them, happiness is rooted in the belief that their lives hold value because they are useful to someone. Kashimi and Koga argue that as long as people feel they're making a meaningful contribution, they stop worrying about others' opinions. Each person must define what being useful means to them. Once you discover what truly gives your life purpose, anything outside of it will feel unimportant. Even if you meet others' expectations but fail to feel useful, genuine happiness will remain out of reach. They add that when someone truly feels they're making a difference, they no longer need external recognition. That sense of contribution already provides the inner assurance that I am of value without the need for constant acknowledgement. In essence, a person obsessed with recognition has yet to develop a true sense of community, self-acceptance, trust in others, or genuine contribution. For happy individuals, helping others isn't a form of self-sacrifice. It's something they do because it brings them personal satisfaction and meaning. Though it might appear self-centered, Kashimi and Koga argue that this approach is the foundation of true emotional well-being. It's perfectly acceptable if your purpose in life is to seek your own happiness. When you focus on your well-being, it naturally allows you to bring joy to others. People who are genuinely happy tend to help without expecting anything in return. According to the authors, doing good because it brings you joy is a far stronger motivator than doing it simply because it's considered the right thing. That's because self-sacrifice aimed at being viewed as a good person is, in reality, another form of seeking approval. Kashimi and Koga suggest that anyone can experience happiness by realizing that their mere existence adds value to the lives of others. Humans are wired to care for each other, and simply being present among others can be meaningful. There's no need to achieve anything extraordinary to matter. From this perspective, happy individuals believe that every human life has worth, even if someone hasn't accomplished anything notable. Because of this, they're able to accept themselves, flaws, mistakes, and all. They understand that their presence alone holds value for the people around them. This mindset helps them feel content despite their imperfections. While the authors acknowledge that some people contribute more to society than others, they note that unhappy people often see others' success as a threat. In contrast, happy people celebrate it. Since they believe everyone can bring happiness simply by existing, they don't see life as a competition. The achievements of others don't lessen their own value as human beings. Ultimately, happy people stay grounded in the present, appreciating life as it unfolds. Kashimi and Koga emphasize that happiness is a choice available to anyone at any moment. Many believe they must accomplish something great to feel fulfilled, but that's a misconception. True happiness comes from recognizing the small positive ways we already influence others. This doesn't mean you should abandon your goals. Instead, it's about finding joy and meaning along the way, so that even if life ended unexpectedly, you wouldn't feel it was wasted. The central message of the book is simple yet powerful. No matter what you do, not everyone will like you. Therefore, lasting happiness comes from accepting this truth and having the courage to live in alignment with your own values, not others' expectations. Letting go of the need for approval and embracing the courage to be disliked is the foundation of genuine happiness